Someone help him. The hyenas have snapped. He raised them like family. And now they're ripping him to pieces.
The screams echoed through the dry morning air of northern Namibia like a fire alarm in a sleeping town. Dust swirled in the chaos. A neighbor frozen at the edge of the property line could only watch in horror as the man known for loving wild animals was now fighting for his life, being torn apart by the very creatures he once cradled in his arms like newborn puppies. Blood soaked into the sand, claws tore at flesh, and all the trust, all the years, all the love shattered in an instant. But to understand what really happened that morning, we have to go back to when it all began. Hey, if you're moved by true emotional stories like this, stories of animals' love betrayal, and the wild unknown, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our animal story family. We bring you powerful real-life tales every week. You won't want to miss what comes next. His name was Ethan Whitaker. Just a simple man with a soft heart and a quiet life, tucked away near the edge of Etosha National Park. At 52, Ethan had lived through more than his share of pain. A former safari guide turned recluse, he retreated from society after losing his wife and daughter in a car accident 5 years prior. Some people drink to forget. Some people run. Ethan, he walked into the wild. He bought a small patch of dry land just outside the protected zone. A place where the savannah stretched out like a painting, where jackals laughed at dusk and lions roared miles away through the night wind. Ethan didn't move there for peace. He moved there for purpose, and that purpose came one scorching afternoon in the form of tragedy. A mother hyena had been gunned down by poachers, left to rot beside a dried-out watering hole. Her 4 pups, barely old enough to open their eyes, were crying in the brush nearby. Most locals would have walked away or worse, put them down out of fear. But not Ethan. He knelt beside them, heart-pounding, and whispered, "You don't deserve to die for what people did." He took them home, named them one by one Nix, Rollo Vega, and Moby, and fed them goat's milk from bottles the same way he once fed his baby girl back when life felt whole. They weren't just rescued, they were adopted, and from that moment on, the world outside no longer mattered to Ethan Whitaker. Neighbors called him crazy. Even his old friends from the safari circuit warned him. "You can't raise hyenas like pets," they said. But Ethan didn't see animals, he saw souls. He'd post updates on Facebook videos of him napping in the sun with Vega, curled at his side like a lapdog, or playing tug-of-war with Rollo using an old tire. People around the world started watching. Some praised him, some judged. But all were captivated. He spoke about them like a proud father. "Nix is the smart one," he once said in an interview. "She figures out how to open the gate before I even finish locking it." Then he laughed, completely unaware of the storm that would one day follow. What bonded Ethan to those animals wasn't just empathy. It was grief. The kind of grief that wraps around your heart and never lets go. The kind that searches for meaning in places most people fear. And somehow in the snarling laugh of a spotted hyena pup, Ethan found something worth living for. But wild things, they grow. And not everything that starts with love ends that way. Ethan wasn't always the man people saw on Facebook, half wild himself, walking barefoot through the bush with 4 hyenas trailing him like loyal dogs. Once upon a time, he wore collared shirts and shined his boots. He guided tourists through the African plains, pointing out rhinos and telling kids how to tell a cheetah from a leopard. He used to smile more, but that was before the accident, before the rain-slick road, before the phone call that turned his world upside down. After the funeral, Ethan stopped answering calls, sold his truck, moved out to the bush where the only voices were the wind and the animals. And for a long time, he lived in silence. Until the pups came along. It started with just survival. Goat's milk warmed on the camp stove syringe, feeding every 3 hours. Then came teething. Then solid food. Ethan built them a shaded pen, then expanded it. Then came the moment he opened the gate, and they didn't run. They stayed. Chose him. He never put collars on them. Never locked them up. They slept in his bed, curled around his legs. He called them his kids. To most, hyenas are nightmares with fur-ugly, vicious scavengers. But Ethan saw past the reputation. They're smart, he told a local reporter once. Smarter than dogs. And they love just as fiercely if you let them. And he did. He let them into his life, into his routine, into the hollowed-out places where grief used to sit. And they filled it not like bandages, but like fire. Wild, unpredictable, but warm. He shared videos almost weekly. One showed Vega and Moby pulling Ethan around the yard on a rope like overgrown sled dogs. Another captured Rollo, licking Ethan's face as he tried to record a message. His laugh, real and unguarded, echoed through every clip. Viewers from around the world tuned in, calling him the hyena dad. His followers grew into the tens of thousands. Comments ranged from heartwarming to alarmed. I've never seen anything like this. It's beautiful. This is going to end badly. You can't tame wild nature. But Ethan didn't read most of them. He didn't need the world's approval. He had something stronger. At the center of it all was Nyx, the firstborn, the boldest. She was his shadow, slept at his feet, watched the door, growled at birds that got too close. Sometimes Ethan would talk to her like a person, voice soft and steady. I don't have anyone else, you know. It's just you and me now. And Nyx would tilt her head, eyes deep, unreadable, but never leaving his. There was something unspoken between them. A code. A bond forged not in blood, but in grief, instinct, and something almost sacred. Friends, at least the few he had left, would stop by every few months to check in. They'd bring coffee, maybe a few supplies, and leave with more questions than answers. Ethan, man, they're getting big. You sure you've got this under control? He'd smile and say, they're my family. They'd never hurt me. But as the months passed, those friends started coming less. The questions turned sharper. The animals turned quieter. And Ethan, he was happier than he'd been in years. He didn't see the shift. Or maybe he did, and just chose not to. Because when the only thing that ever healed you comes with teeth, you don't look too close at the bite. For a while, it was like something out of a fairy tale. If fairy tales had claws and wild laughter in the dark, Ethan and the hyenas became a local legend. At first, the stories spread in whispers. The guy out near the old safari track with the pet hyenas. But as the videos kept going viral, the myth became a movement. People from across the country, even from other continents, started calling him the hyena whisperer. His videos hit millions of views. Teachers showed his clips in animal behavior classes. Wildlife forums debated whether he was insane, enlightened, or both. But if you asked Ethan, it wasn't about going viral. It was about love. Every morning he'd walk the edge of his land barefoot, the 4 hyenas flanking him like a royal guard. They didn't need leashes. They didn't need commands. They just knew. Nyx always to his right, Rollo bounding ahead, Vega and Moby trotting behind, nipping at each other like mischievous twins. They ate together, played together, and on colder nights they curled up in the cabin as a pack with Ethan at the center, like a king on a throne of fur and trust. Neighbors who once doubted him began to soften. One even admitted, I watched through my binoculars, and damn it, looked like they were hugging him. Local kids started drawing pictures of Ethan with his hyena babies. A school even invited him to speak via video call. He wore a dusty flannel and smiled nervously while Rollo sat beside him like an obedient, oversized dog. The kids gasped in delight when Vega poked her head into the frame and licked his ear. In a world that often felt cold and disconnected, Ethan had built something raw and powerful. Something real. He never treated them like pets. They weren't domesticated. They weren't trained. They were companions, equals, souls that had found each other at the edge of survival. They saved me, Ethan once said in a short documentary clip. I took them in, but they're the ones who gave me life again. But what struck people most wasn't the novelty of it. It was the quiet affection in his touch, the way Nix would press her forehead against his chest, eyes closed. The way Moby would roll onto his back belly, exposed tail thumping like a mutt begging for scratches. In one clip, Ethan was repairing a fence post while the hyenas lounged nearby. A sudden gust of wind knocked over a ladder. Instantly, Nix leapt to her feet and stood between Ethan and the noise teeth bared toward the wind. It was instinct. Protection. She guards me like a soldier, he joked. But there was pride in his voice. And something else too, neat. You could see it if you looked close. The way Ethan lingered when he fed them hand-pressed to their fur just a second too long. The way he spoke to them not as owner to animal, but as father to child. Or maybe survivor to survivor. He had built a new kind of family. One not defined by blood or species, but by loss and loyalty. And to the thousands watching online, it felt unbreakable, unshakable, until it wasn't. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it so hard to see. At first, Ethan chalked it up to growing pains. The hyenas weren't pups anymore. They were big, really big. Rollo had packed on nearly 130 pounds. Nix's shoulders stood nearly chest high. Even Moby the runt had jaws strong enough to crush a femur. Still, Ethan wasn't worried. He figured as long as he stayed calm, as long as they felt safe, everything would stay the same. But then came the growls, not playful ones. Not the snorting, chattering laughter that Ethan used to joke, sounded like a teenager with asthma. These were deeper, lower, like something primal was waking up. The first time it happened, Ethan was cleaning out their outdoor den and Nix didn't want to move. He nudged her gently like he always did. But instead of trotting off, she whipped her head around and bared her teeth. No bite, just a warning. Still, Ethan froze. Her eyes didn't look at him the way they used to. Just a bad day, he told himself. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she smelled something unfamiliar. Maybe it was nothing. But it wasn't just Nix. Vega started snarling at birds flying overhead. Rollo began pacing the fence line at night, shoulders twitching like he was tracking something invisible. Moby, the gentlest one, started snapping at the food dish if Ethan got too close while he was eating. They were restless, alert, charged like the air before a lightning strike. One night, a neighbor stopped by unannounced, just to check in, maybe share a beer like the old days. Ethan hadn't seen him in over a year, but the moment the truck pulled up, Nix and Rollo ran straight for the gate. Teeth bared, shoulders hunched, barking not playfully but like predators. The neighbor never got out of the truck. He just called from the window, voice tight. Ethan, this isn't normal, man. They're not pets. You've got to start thinking about safety. Ethan waved him off. They're just protective. They don't know you anymore. But deep down, even he felt it. Something was off. The tension hung in the air like a frayed wire. He started locking his cabin door at night. Not because he was scared, but because, as he told himself, they're growing. It's just a precaution. He never admitted it out loud. But once, after hearing Rollo snarling in his sleep, Ethan had grabbed a flashlight and watched from the window for hours just in case. Then came the email. A wildlife specialist who had seen Ethan's viral videos reached out. She worked with apex predators and wanted to talk not for TV, but for safety. She'd watched their behavior closely and noticed small critical signs. Ears pulled too far back, tails rigid, unprovoked lunges. She offered to fly out, to observe, to help. Ethan never replied. To him, these weren't animals needing taming. They were his children. And no one tells a father how to love his kids. They've never hurt me, he told the mirror one morning. They never will. But the signs were all there. In the silences. In the stares. In the way Nix no longer ran to greet him in the morning, but instead stood watching still and silent. Love, Ethan believed, could conquer instinct. That trust, built over years, couldn't be broken in a moment. But nature doesn't make promises. It just waits. April 3rd, 2024. Started like any other morning on Ethan's land. The sky was painted soft orange. Birds were calling out through the brush. Ethan poured himself a mug of coffee, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and opened his phone to start a live stream. He had done this 100 times, just short clips showing what life was like with his pack. His audience loved the calmness, the bond, the strangeness of it all. This morning he aimed the camera at himself and smiled. "Morning, y'all. The kids are hungry and I got goat stew ready. Let's see who's first to the bowl." He turned the camera and walked toward the yard where Nix, Rollo Vega, and Moby waited behind the gate. Their eyes followed him. Not like family, though. Not like before. Nix was pacing. Ethan opened the gate anyway. He didn't see the tension in their bodies. Didn't hear the low rumble in Vega's throat. Or maybe he did, but forced himself not to believe it. He kneeled to pet Rollo camera, still in hand. That's when Nix lunged. It happened in a blink. 1 second Ethan was smiling. The next, he was on his back, pinned to the dirt, Nix's jaws locked on his shoulder. His scream tore through the air like a siren. The camera dropped, landing sideways in the grass, but still streaming. Viewers watching at home froze. You could hear the snapping of teeth. The desperate cry, "Nix! No, stop!" "What are you doing?" Rollo joined in next, followed by Vega. Moby stood back at first, whining confused, but instinct won out. His jaws clamped down on Ethan's leg, tearing through muscle. Blood soaked into the ground. Ethan tried to crawl, tried to reach the back porch, but they dragged him back like a deer in the jaws of wolves. Neighbors heard the screaming and called for help, but they lived too far. The sheriff wouldn't arrive for another 22 minutes. The live stream ran the entire time. Thousands watched in real time as the man who raised 4 predators as his family was devoured by them on his own land. Some screamed into their phones. Others cried. Some couldn't look away. And when the deputies finally arrived, they found nothing left but torn clothes, blood, and 4 hyenas circling the cabin jaws, wet eyes, blank. 3 were put down immediately. Moby fled into the nearby brush and disappeared. The live stream was taken down within hours, but not before it had been shared by news stations and social media outlets across the globe. The hyena dad, eaten alive by his own animals. Love can't tame wildness. Live stream of death, internet shaken. For those who knew Ethan, who followed his journey from the beginning, the shock was unbearable. They had seen his love, his gentleness, his belief that something beautiful could be built between man and nature. But belief isn't always enough. Trust, no matter how deep, cannot erase instinct. And love doesn't always save you. The cabin stood quiet for weeks after the attack. The hyenas were gone. So was Ethan. But the land still remembered. The neighbors wouldn't go near it. Not out of fear, but out of respect. They said you could still hear wind chimes on the porch at dusk. And sometimes, if the wind blew just right, it carried the ghost of Ethan's voice, soft laughing, calling Nix home. The official report called it a fatal wildlife incident. A line item. Another statistic, but for the people who followed his journey. The ones who had tuned in for years, who had watched his life unfold one video at a time. Ethan's death was something else, something deeper. He had believed in something powerful, that love could tame even the wildest things, that grief could be healed with connection, that broken hearts could find family in the most unlikely places. And for a while, he was right. There were online memorials, tribute videos, candlelight vigils streamed from halfway across the world. Fans posted old clips of Ethan cuddling with Vega or laughing as Rollo knocked over a potted plant. They called him brave, gentle, foolish, beautiful. But there were others, too, voices that weren't as kind. He should have known better. They were wild. He made them into something they weren't and paid the price. This isn't love. This is delusion, the truth. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. 3 weeks after the attack, Moby was found. He was hiding near a dried-out stream bed 5 miles from the cabin, starving and weak. A wildlife unit sedated him, scanned his microchip, and confirmed what everyone already knew. Some wanted him euthanized on the spot, but Ethan's sister Linda, his only living family, stepped in and begged them to spare him. Ethan loved that animal, she said through tears. He wouldn't want his death to end in more death. Moby was eventually transferred to a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa, where he remains today, alone behind reinforced fencing, watched day and night. A symbol of a love that reached too far, and a life that burned too brightly. Ethan was cremated and buried under a marula tree near the edge of his land, where the hyenas used to nap beside him in the sun. His headstone bears a single line, no date, no title. Just this, he believed, and maybe that's what hurts the most. Not that he died, but that he died believing. Believing he was safe. Believing he was loved, believing that love would always be enough. And now maybe the question isn't about Ethan, or the hyenas, or even what went wrong. Maybe the question is about us. Do we really understand the wild things we claim to love? Or more importantly, are we dangerously humanizing animals in ways they never asked for? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or question, subscribe to Animal Story. We tell the kinds of stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for watching.